Well, one thing I've discussed in the book is trying to understand, what's happening, and where it seems to be leading. There are three main aspects of this transformational process that I usually sort of put forward for people to think about. The first is the biosphere, destruction and the acceleration of that. The second is this technological evolution and the acceleration of that, and how that actually is affecting our sense of being selves. So like you have, social networks, cell phones, and I think they're actually having an impact on the nature of the psyche. So that we no longer, you look at the 19th century or early 20th century, people felt like these kind of alienated individualities imprisoned in these towers. But now, if you have your BlackBerry on you, you're constantly getting a stream of information and connectivity from everybody around you. So I think that they're actually kind of softening the boundaries of the self and making the self a little more permeable. And in the same respect, the third aspect of this transformational process for me is this change in the nature of the psyche. And that it seems that for more and more people, the psychic aspect of reality is becoming more evident and more apparent, and they're becoming more and more aware of how intention actually seems to change what happens to you, projection changes what happens to you, and how synchronicities work and actually are not just accidents, but somehow are almost like this sense of this kind of synaptic, self-organizing consciousness of humanity kind of coming together or something. And then one aspect of that I would say is that it's almost as if the materiality of our world is becoming a little bit like subtly less dense and more psychically responsive. So it's almost as if the boundary of the physical and the psychic are not as hard as they once were. It's almost like we can, begin to like push through them a little bit. So I do think that is something that's happening. I don't know what that looks like in an evolutionary future. I mean, there's nanotechnology, and so on. I mean, it may be that we become more self-directed in our material expression. And I had one experience on DMT that I write about in 2012, where at the end of the trip, I came back into the room and I looked around, and everybody around me was covered in these prismatic sort of tattooings and these kind of armatures. They had these kind of like helmet gear and science fiction. They all looked kind of like the sort of cosmic bodhisattvic superheroes of their fantasies or something. But it was like, but each one was so specific in particular when I looked around that it seemed totally impossible, that it was just what a quote unquote hallucination. It was more like I was almost like seeing something from the future. That it was what I wrote about in the book was I had the sense that we actually had arranged from wherever we were then to like come back into this time to have this much more crude and entertaining experience together. And then we would like recapitulate it later or earlier or never or whenever that other thing happened. And maybe that kind of in this next, if there is some kind of dimensional shift, that we become much more self-directed in terms of our ability to manifest in time and space. But that may not happen in 2012. 2012 may just be the beginning of an awareness that the psyche has this different reality to it than we had grown accustomed to, and then it might take 50 years to 5,000 years, who knows, to really move into that other psychic reality. So it's like for me, all bets are off. But the main thing is, first of all, just that shift in paradigms, so that we become aware of what's been negated by Western consciousness up to this point.